religion was dying. For far too long, religion and the religious leaders had brought about wars, hate, and discrimination. Religious folks stood in the way of progress. They tried, and in a lot of cases, were successful in stripping away people's civil rights. There was no common human decency for the people that lived in any manner of way that they disagreed with. Religion stood in the way of science and knowledge, slowing and even halting man's ability to make advances. Millions of lives had been lost in holy wars, waged based on what was supposed to be a merciful, all-loving God, through the refusal of modern medicine and/or senseless murder because their loving God didn't approve of what the victim was doing. What kind of loving God would ever allow this to take place? Millions of lives lost through famine, drought, earthquakes, wildfires, tornadoes, floods, and all other manner of natural disasters. Lives lost or ruined by abusive parents, sexual slavery, and every type of cruelty that one can imagine. The souls that did that to them should have had special places in the deepest, darkest pits of hell reserved. But the church would always teach that even the worst offenders could always be let into heaven, simply by repenting on their deathbed. That no matter what someone did, no matter how horrible they were in life, there was no consequence because by repenting, they could still enter the kingdom of heaven. What kind of God would allow this? Would allow that kind of evil into paradise? Religion has stood in the way of human evolution. Our brains got bigger and bigger, and as a whole, humanity got smarter and smarter. But as a species, humanity has been continuously held back. Religion had retarded the progress of science. They shamed, ostracized, and attacked free thinkers. The fear that they may finally have some kind of proof that disagrees with their God would cause them to lash out, ignoring facts and attempting to quell any thoughts on the matter. Attempting to shut down anyone and any research they were doing that touched on anything that questioned blind faith. Religion has almost been the end of humanity. People that follow religion and spread hate and ignorance, while claiming to love. They would destroy and take, they would kill and judge, and all the while claiming mercy and grace. The hypocrisy was staggering. But as it always does, the world just kept turning and time kept flowing forward. Nothing could stop that. People grew old and died. As they did, a new generation would take their place. And as this new generation grew up, change was in the air. A mirror held up to the religious people. They were able to see their hypocrisy. Put on display were all the tragedies caused by religion, and the world was shown what evils rose out of it, disguised in love. Slowly, the older society eventually died out, and the new generation, having grown up seeing the consequences of blind faith, began to abandon religion altogether. They grew up seeing the toxicity of it all, the pain it caused, the lives that it cost. It took decades and decades, but one by one, religions began falling. It started with the most wild cults. Even as the most outlandish examples fell, the big religions already had rumblings. The denominations of the big ones began to crumble, until the world was left with Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. They hung on the longest. But eventually even these religious giants completely died, as all but hardcore believers abandoned their faith and turned away from their respective gods. Across the world, the churches were just outright abandoned at first. As a congregation slowly disbanded, without offerings, churches had no way to sustain, and with governments overturning the separation of church and state, they became required to pay taxes. Over time, the abandoned former places of worship were converted into things that humanity actually needed. Things like homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and other such buildings to help the less fortunate. The homeless were clothed and fed, trained and put to work. In the wake of the church crumbling, homelessness came to an end. first in the First World, and then over the globe. It became a societal normality to spend Sunday with the family and friends, relaxing and enjoying each other's company. This led to the families being closer, which in turn lowered things like drug addiction, suicide, and other such problems, like alcoholism. The money that was going to the churches was turned back into the economy, which boosted it. With a boosted economy, more jobs were created, enough for everyone. No one had to live in poverty anymore. Crime almost completely disappeared. Wars began to end without religion, and the prejudice and the judgment that divided the world, fighting between the countries, began to die down. And eventually, they began to work together and slowly work toward a one-world government. Under the one world first, second, and third worlds did not exist. All countries were equal, with the same laws and punishments, as well as help financially, and help in any other fashion for those in need. Disease fell as medicine became extremely advanced. Without the pointlessness of prayer, medicine was invested in. Death was a disease that was eliminated, and life was great. No one had to grow old, and no one had to experience the crushing loss of death. Overcrowding would have been an issue, if not for the ingenuity and drive towards science that was held back by religion. Humanity began to pour themselves out into the dark void of space, exploring, mining, and ultimately colonizing the other rocky planets in our solar system and other neighboring systems. God had fallen out of the public eye completely, and became the stuff of old legends, talked about in a romantic nature, and thought of fondly as a figure that the ignorant people of the past had worshipped with the greatest of intentions. He was taught in schools as a warning of what can happen when people follow blindly on the basis of faith without question. Religion was dead. God was dead. He joined the ranks of other ancient and almost forgotten deities such as Zeus and Kronos. Without God, without religion, cults were non-existent. Ritualistic killings and suicides all became things of a darker, more barbaric time. Earth had become a peaceful place, a paradise even. All people lived in harmony, in equality. The world had never known such an acceptance and love. He walked the earth to and fro. He looked over and watched everything that had happened. He watched the transformation, gleeful and happy. He truly admired his work. He was proud of the things he had done. He had performed miracles, guided the human race to perfection. He was overjoyed. The job was done effectively and completely. Peace, love, and harmony now reigned across the land and across the solar system. Humanity had become what he had always known it could be. They were more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. Humanity as a whole was happy. Satisfied with his journey, satisfied with the work he'd done, and satisfied with the wondrous outcome, he returned home. He sat on his glorious throne, a place that he had not been in 1,000 years, as he worked to shape humanity into the beauty that it should have been all along. Being away from his home for such a long time will now finally be worth it. All the time and effort he spent helping humanity grow, he could now enjoy watching the outcome of everything that he had done. A wicked smile slowly crept across his face. Surrounded by suffering and pain, torturous screams echoing throughout, he was overwhelmed with pride. His plan had succeeded in giving humanity all it's ever wanted, in ending the wars, the turmoil, the pain, and the suffering. He won.
Father, it's over. Humanity has turned their back on us.
He spoke with incredible sadness in his voice. His father sat silently, but the look of defeat was written clearly across his face. His son could read it plainly. He knew what was going to have to happen. He knew what his father was going to do. He understood that it was the only way but that didn't make it hurt any less. His heart ached. He knew that his father would have to break the promise he had made thousands of years before.